Salvete, discepoli. In this video, we're going to look at the second declension, and it's going to kind of go like the first one went. Going to have an ending for each spot on the chart. But first, let me tell you what the model word is. So in the first declension, you had a model word. The word was terra. It was the word that you declined on your quiz. And other words that belong to the first declension worked like or declined like terra. Well, you're going to have a model word for the second declension and also learn some other words that decline like this word. And so in the second declension, your model word is servus, servi. Now, this is a good opportunity to review why I gave you a word and it's separated with a comma and then kind of another ending here. The ending E, which is the letter I, with a macron on it, but it's pronounced E. So that's kind of odd that I said that was a word, but it's really a word and an ending. Why did I do that? Well, that is called the dictionary form. So remember, the word terra was given to you as terra, terre, right? Which is, and you were told that means land or earth. Well, what that is, again, is that's the nominative form and then the genitive form, the nominative singular, then the genitive singular. So when we give you a word, or when you look up a word in the dictionary, you're going to see those first two forms. And what servus servi is, it's short for servus servi. So instead of the us ending, it's the e ending. And the stem is serve. So the stem on all of them is serve. But just to save room and save ink, the stem isn't written again. So it's servus, comma, the next one is serve with an E on the end instead of the us, and that's the dictionary form. Sometimes you will see them written out, servus, servi, but more often, this is how you're going to see them. Okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of underline, we're going to separate the endings here. So servus, servi, servo. I'm also going to underline it. Servum, servo. And then our stem is serve. So I'm going to write my stem. And I'm going to ask you to get these written down nice and big and legible in your notes, because you're probably going to refer to this in doing your exercises from the book. Okay, and then multiple slaves, if we're talking about slaves being the subject, servi, servorum, servis, and this is just like the first declension in this spot, the dative plural, servos, and then servis again. And so the song to remember words of the first declension goes like this. It goes to the tune of Jingle Bells. It goes, us e o, e orum is os is, and then we do it one more time. Us e o, e orum is os is. So it's 2 times through to do the song. And I'll have you do that with me now. Us e o, e orum is os is. Us e o, e orum is os is. And again, the nominative means slave. Oh, sorry, this word means slave. Slave or servant, same word. Okay. Servus means slave. If the slave was the subject of the sentence, servi means slaves. If the slaves are the subject of the sentence. Servi means of the slave. That's what genitive means. It means of. It can also mean the slaves, the slave, apostrophe S, something. Like something belongs to the slave. It's the slave's book, right? Or the slave's house or something. And servorum means of the slaves, or it means, I'm going to write this down so you can see it, the slaves with the apostrophe outside of the S, right? That means something that belongs to not just one slave, but multiple slaves. So servorum means the slaves is something, or it means of the slaves. Dative, remember that's the case that talks about giving. So this word servo means to the slave, or something's happening for the slave. And servis, to the slaves or for the slaves. The accusative is when you are verbing a slave, right? Calling a slave, commanding a slave, paying a slave. And yeah, sometimes that happened. We would pay a slave sometimes in the Roman Empire. It's not like American slavery. And so servum means just slave. It doesn't require another little word. And servos means slaves, just like the nominative means slave and slaves. They don't require another little word, but it's when you're verbing a slave. I see the slave. I have the slave. I like the slave, right? And then the ablative, servo, and servis. Let's take a look at and see what other words decline like servus, servi. Now, in the first declension, they were mostly feminine words. And so Maria, you saw the name Maria, and that's most female names in Latin are going to belong to the first declension. On page 17 is where you have your list of words that decline like servus. So you have servus servi, you have filius filii, which means son. And from the word filius filii, you have a derivative, which is filial. And that just means sonly. It means like a son. If somebody has a filial relationship with somebody, it's like a father-son relationship. Amicable comes from the word amicus amici, which means friend or of the friend. Amicus means friend. Amici means of the friend, right? Because that's the genitive singular, not the nominative plural. Okay. And then from servus servi comes the word servile, which is just an adjective meaning like a slave. If somebody has a very servile relationship, well, then they have a master-slave relationship. Christus Christi is Christ. Christianus Christiani is Christian. And then we also are throwing in et. So in your sentences to translate, you're going to start seeing et. Okay, so 3 new words for you to consider using in other assignments. And there will be more to come in every little vocab list that shows up along the way. Okay, let's take a look at the first declension endings. I'm just going to put the endings themselves. It goes, don't forget your May crime. Arum, is, as, is. Okay, and start to think about, maybe even make a list, a mental list of what are some of the similarities between the first declension endings and the second declension endings? What are some of the patterns that you see? You can even pause the video here to have a longer look, and I want you to think about them. And so go ahead and do that now. Right, if you're hearing me talk now, hopefully you've had a chance to do that. These are some of the patterns that I see. So first one, the genitive singular and the nominative plural are the same ending. They're both I's. Now there's also another I down here. I see aurum and arum are very similar, and they're in the same spot. Servis, so the ises are exactly the same. And something I'm noticing too is that where there are A's, over here there tend to be O's. So this is arum and A, aurum. Terra, cerveau. Both just the letter with a macron. I see M's here. Now this isn't an O, it's a U, but still there's an M on both of these. And so there are several similarities. These words tend to be masculine words, words in the second declension. So you might notice, a slave. Typically you think of a male slave. In fact, there was another word for female slave in the Roman Empire. Son is obviously masculine. God is masculine. Friend, obviously there are friends who are females, but it's kind of just a generic person word. Christ, masculine. And obviously there are male and female Christians, but typically they're words for either people that could be both or people who have to be male, like Christ, and many names as well. Marcus, Quintus, Brutus. So lots of names that end in us. And so words of the second declension, well, this is called the second declension masculine because there's another category of words that are also second declension words that are neuter. And that'll be something different. Don't worry about those. Those are the ones coming next. Words of the first declension, they tend to be feminine, although there are a few exceptions. Okay? All right. Please make sure that that gets into your notes along with some of the similarities. Just takes note of what some of those similarities are. And now I wrote all over mine. It'd probably be a better idea if you left yours clean because, again, you're going to refer to this. So I should have said that before I started writing, but yeah, have these. Anytime you do a model word, have those notes nice and big, nice and legible. Keep them legible. All right, and then the next video will have some more information and some exercises being done. All right, valete.